Welcome to our June Talk Music webinar with Vito Digiovanni. We are so glad that he is with us tonight, and as you can see, he's ready to go. We are so happy that all of you are joining us. I see several names that I recognize, so thank you for coming back this month. And tonight's topic is going to be awesome. I think it's great because it's something that we all deal with. We all deal with sound and working with sound crews, and I think that we have the right person to talk to us tonight for sure. He has been there and done that, worked with so many churches and teams that I think he will have some great insight for us. So I'm kind of going to give you just a few moments. There's more people coming in, so I'm kind of watching that just for a few seconds. But we are definitely going to have some time at the end tonight for a time of just questions and answers. So I really, I was thinking how to say this, but basically this is your opportunity to have some of your questions answered tonight. From Brother Vito. I think he would be more than welcome. He told me that he'd be totally fine with that. So make sure you do, if you notice the area there where you can chat with me, just kind of jot your questions down, and I'll make sure and put you on with him and let you ask your questions at the end when he's done. So, but anyway, tonight he's going to talk to us really about sound crews and working with them and worship teams working together. And I think that's such a vital topic because all of our churches deal with this area. So, Brother Vito, thank you so much for being here tonight. I know you're very busy. He's right into camp season and doing sound for so many different people, so many places that we appreciate him taking time tonight to be with us. So, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, Brother Vito, and let you take it away.
All right. Hey, guys. I'm glad to be here with everybody. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you guys a little bit. You know, I'm so passionate about just sound ministry because it's what I do, every day of my life. I teach it at IBC, Indiana Bible College, and I get the opportunity to travel to a lot of churches to do training and stuff with churches. So I get to see sometimes the good, the bad, and the ugly of oftentimes, and it's kind of fun because you see what you would like to implement, and you see what maybe you would never want to implement in some situations. But one of the big things that I think is we deal with, and you probably know from experience, is sometimes there tends to be a gap between what's happening in the sound booth and what's happening on stage, or what's happening on the platform. And it's really unfortunate in a lot of situations. I've been in some churches where like there's like just this like hostility, there's just this tension, and you can't even talk to each other. Like the platform ministry is afraid to say something to the sound guy because they're afraid of that person's just going to blow up, or the sound person's afraid to say anything to the music minister because they don't want to get them upset or whatever. And so there's not this community of working together, and it's really unfortunate because I think we're not maximizing our unity. And without unity, the anointing is not going to flow. I mean, it's biblical that unity and the anointing are interdependent of one another. And so I think it's all going to basically start with the vision of the pastor, first and foremost, to be implemented to the teams of the church. But one of the issues I think that tends to be the case is that the worship team sometimes reports to a different people than the sound ministry or than all the tech ministry in the church. So first and foremost, we have to first get the right approach with dealing with and working with this ministry and understanding what its value is of sound ministry. And I think it's one of probably the most underappreciated ministries in a lot of our churches. I feel like it is probably not valued or even understood oftentimes. People don't even realize like to operate a sound system at a professional level and to maintain it and to mix really well, it's not a utility, and I think we need to put it in its place, which is, and this is what I want to talk about today, is we want to approach sound ministry as another member of the worship team, the person mixing. We want to approach that ministry as they're a member of the worship team. In essence, the mixer itself, that's their instrument. You know, they're crafting something behind that mixer when they're operating in that music level of musicality. You know, like we could probably teach anybody to mix to ride a preaching mic. You can teach anybody to do that, and it's kind of utilitarian. I could turn it up, I could turn it down if it needs to go up and down. But when it comes to mixing music, it takes an ear. It takes somebody that understands music. And some of the best sound operators that I've ever been around are either musicians, primarily, or if they're not a musician, they're people that really love music, like music aficionados or like audiophiles, guys that just love to be around music, and they have an appreciation for music. So I think one of the big problems that we've had traditionally in a lot of churches that I've been to is that we've treated sound too much like a utility and not a ministry. We've treated it like it's a guy turning on a light switch, a guy fixing a computer network, or somebody, running wires for an electrical thing, But it's sad, but by doing that, we've just basically made sound just this minuscule thing. So what I want to impart to us today, and I know a lot of you are music ministers and stuff, but let's empower our sound people by first and foremost you understanding the value of that ministry, but also showing them the value of the ministry so they can see it for themselves. Because I guarantee you that a lot of the sound people that across this country, they don't even understand the value of it. They don't even understand how by their hands on those faders, by tweaking those knobs, how they can actually impact the service for good or for bad, for better or for worse. And so they have the ability to ruin the impact of the service. And you've probably experienced that maybe before. But they also have the ability to make that service that much more impactful by being able to flow with the team and being able to flow with what's happening ultimately in the Spirit. And I really do believe that you have to be Spirit-filled to be a sound operator in a Pentecostal church, because you can't understand how to work in the Spirit if you're not filled in the Spirit. So I'm not really a fan of hiring outside sound people to mix. Now, sure, they can mix music, but they can't operate on that next level, which is in church sound, in apostolic church sound, which is flowing under the unction of the Spirit and flowing with the team in the Holy Ghost. And so that's what separates, you could say, what we do as sound operators from maybe the concert world and stuff. So anyway, so ultimately, I think one of the problems that I've seen is that there's sometimes our sound people report to a different set of people than the worship team. But let's look at how the paradigm or how the approach really, how I kind of teach it. So you have your pastor, that's kind of obviously the head of the church. He imparts a vision to your team, to the church. Then you have your minister of music, right? And then below that, you could say you have your sound team, whoever's in charge of sound. So the approach that I teach is that is categorizing the sound ministry under the worship ministry, or as a part of the worship ministry of your church. Not a separate division, but an integral part of the worship ministry. Because truly they're an extension of what's happening on the platform. And they're dependent on you, and you're dependent on them. When it comes down to it, we really are dependent on each other. Because me as a sound person, I can't do my job unless you do a good job, unless you succeed at what you're doing. I need you as a music minister, as a singer, as a band member, to ultimately do a good job, because that's what helps me do a good job. And I can't do it without you. And certainly, you can't do it without me. Otherwise, there'd be no purpose for a sound person as well. So we can't do it without each other. So we got to understand that concept, I think, as well. So we got to be able to understand, I think, how to keep the vision of why. What are we trying to do as a team, and what are we trying to build here in the first place before I think we move any further with it. So, and I think this starts with a few different things. And so let me start talking. Let me just give you some things that I've seen that can really help this. First and foremost, and Jeremy and I were talking about this earlier, that sometimes to break the ice with this kind of thing, if you feel like, we're really divided or whatever, sometimes to break the ice, the best thing you could do is just serve each other in a sense. like have a servant's mindset. You got to break the ice yourself. If you don't think that the sound person, you know, when I go and teach sound at churches and stuff and do training, often I get to communicate to the sound people. So I get to tell them, okay, you guys got to break the ice. You have to have the mentality that you're there to serve the platform ministry. And so it makes a huge difference when the sound guy's up on the platform and saying, hey, is it sound good up there? You know, instead of being at the booth the whole time and not walking up and helping things on the stage. But at the same time, on the flip side, for the music team, for the people on the platform, you should also be, I would say it's a good idea to ask the sound person, what'd you think about it today? How did it sound? Do you think ask them questions like that and work with them on maybe even selecting some of the gear you use. Because, you know, I think I watched an interview one time with some of Hillsong's musicians and how they kind of work with their sound person. And the guy was talking about drums and cymbals and stuff. And he said, you know, they were asking, well, what cymbals do you use? Or what cymbals do you use on your drum kit? And he said, well, I just work with the sound person, and we picked these cymbals based upon what was working best out in the congregation, out in the audience. And so he didn't pick those cymbals based upon what he liked, what he felt like was the best piano sound, you know, or the best bass sound that he preferred, you know, or the best guitar tone that they thought they liked in their headphones, and that's what they stuck with. But that guy chose his tones. He chose what he was doing, the tone of what he was doing, based upon communication with the sound person, which is ultimately trying to make it work for the congregation. You have no clue really when you're on the platform, really how that translates to the congregation. You don't. There's no way for you to even dictate the mix from the platform as well, because you're behind the speakers. So you have to put a level of trust in your sound person, you know, and their skill, that they're going to be able to make those decisions and work with them on maybe gear choice and things like that. So I really push that here at the Bible College. When I'm working with the students, I encourage the sound people to communicate consistently on and ask each other questions. And it's that dialogue that you build up, that sort of camaraderie that you build up, that really will start breaking down the barriers and breaking down the gap. Because what we're trying to do is we need to build a bridge, you know. And oftentimes what we do is, instead of building a bridge, you know, we got a gap. How do you fill that gap? Is you build a bridge. And that bridge comes from the communication, building camaraderie, building the relationship with each other, to be able to have this mutual respect and a level of trust. Now, if you don't have a level of trust, then we have to work on that, you know, by itself. But often when we have issues, we tend to not build bridges. What we do build a lot of times, or what we do build, is we build a case. We build a case against the situation. I think we got to get away from the always and never mentality. You know, like the mentality of saying that's always going to be like that, or he's always plays out of tune, or he always doesn't give us enough monitor, or they'll never change the way they hold the mic, or they'll never play the guitar, you know, play the right chords or something, you know. So we build a case against everybody, but we never actually build a bridge to help solve the problems. And that concept alone can be applied to anything in what we do, for sure. But in the sound ministry, between the sound ministry and the stage, we got to get away from building a case and start building a bridge. And it's not going to come by you having pride on the platform and saying, this is the way I want it, this is the way we want it to be, and dictating that to the sound person. But really, it's going to come by you empowering them, letting them feel like a member of the team, and understanding that there's a vision that we're trying to accomplish, you know, and we're working together, and that we need each other. You know, you could compare it like this, you know, like it's like being on a baseball team. Some play in the outfield, some play in the infield, you know. So think of it that way. Your sound booth is in the outfield, I guess. So we want to empower each other that way. So I would also say, your skill itself is actually flowing out of an identity based upon who God says you are. We're a called people, we're a royal priesthood. So the priest was responsible for preparing a place where the people of God were going to experience the presence of God. So it's all one team, We're all there to do the same thing. I will say a couple other things before we end it up. But here's some tips that I have for you guys to help get your sound person on the same page and to get them. First of all, you got to treat them as a member of the worship team. So keep them in the texts. Put your sound person in the communication loop, just like you would communicate to the rest of your team about what songs you're going to do, and your sets and everything. Communicate that to your sound guys. If you're using Planning Center, give access to your sound booth guys or girls what's happening in Planning Center. If you don't use Planning Center, a simple piece of paper with the worship set on it before service could help. If you don't pick your songs until the last minute or whatever, if you do pick them ahead of time, send your sound person a text and say, hey, these are the songs for worship. And if you do communicate, even be ahead of time to your whole team, however you do that, whether it be giving out Dropbox links to songs or Facebook, doing YouTube links to stuff that for your praise team to listen to. Well, here's an idea. Give the songs to your sound person to listen to so they can learn the material just like the rest of the worship team does. Because I can't mix a song unless I know how that song's supposed to go. I can't mix a song correctly unless I understand the approach to that music, And beyond that, you may have for some reason at IBC we have songs that have a bunch of soloists that switch on and off between 9 microphones or 6 microphones, and one person sings one line and the next person sings another line. That's not easy for a sound person to mix. It's not. Those are things that I have to actually have cues for to know the material enough. It's not even enough sometimes to memorize it, but I also often have a PowerPoint presentation right next to me, and just to give me cues on what's happening in the mix to know when stuff is coming up. And when I do special events, I have a person, a student or another person next to me with the PowerPoint presentation, just kind of bugging my ear to say, okay, get ready. Microphone 2 is singing this next line on this verse. And so the more you could communicate that stuff to your team, that they don't have to just figure that stuff out on their own, the better off you're going to be. And you're going to set yourself up for success. It's a fallacy or it's a lie to think that turning up all the mics and leaving them there and that everybody's going to be heard perfectly clearly no matter who solos where is you're lying to yourself if you think that, because it doesn't work that way. People sometimes say, well, can't you just keep all the mics up and we could hear everybody perfectly? It doesn't work that way. It's difficult. You've got to be able to create something musical, and that means riding the faders, moving the music around dynamically with what's happening in the service. And it takes a very attentive person to do that. So those are some of the things that I would do. Give them a copy of the lyric sheet and have them take notes themselves as well. Or I appreciate it so much when we're doing a rehearsal for a camp or something, and sometimes I don't know who's doing what, and then afterward I have a conversation with the worship leader, and they tell me, who's doing the solos where, and they communicate it to me. They give it to me on a piece of paper, they text it to me, whatever it is. It makes a huge difference. The next thing that I would say about helping your sound team get with the worship team, be on the same team, is attending rehearsals. Okay, it should be fundamental, but in many churches that I've been, the sound person doesn't come to rehearsals. They don't come, and that should be a no-no. It should be they should always be attending rehearsals, just like the rest of the band is attending rehearsals, because it's time for them to run through the material just like everyone else. And so, the band has personal practice time. You might have personal practice time, but you know what? The personal practice time for the sound person is a lot of times listening to the music ahead of time, understanding the style. Maybe they're practicing mixing like a worship set using Virtual Soundcheck and stuff now. You know, all that stuff is the industry, the sort of the ministry's changed now, and there's a lot of ways to practice. But so we don't have the ability to just sit down and, you know, mix at home, you know. So we need to be at rehearsal as sound people, learning the material just like everyone else. So getting everybody on the same page. So I'm just a huge fan of that, you know. So I do feel like we're underappreciated as a ministry. That's for sure. I think people don't realize, like, to do it correctly. You know, I just went to a conference called First In, Last Out. It's a tech conference, and I think it has such a fitting name because often the sound person has to be there before the worship team to turn everything on, get everything ready, test everything out, and then they're there after the worship team, shutting it all down, you know, putting everything away, wrapping up cables and stuff, and so on. So First In, Last Out's a good name for that ministry. So I hope that helps you a little bit. You know, we could go on and on, but I really want to get to some of you guys' questions for today. So.
Thanks, Brother Vito. Those are great topics, great things you were having to say. I wrote some of them down. I love the whole building a bridge. That's, if we could sum up tonight, I think that was one of the things I'm going to take away is, you said a lot of people build a case, but let's build a bridge, because those of you that are here tonight, go ahead and jot down your questions if you have questions now, and I'll go ahead and put you on with Vito. But I had a question I wanted to ask you real quick, and hopefully it's not too deep of a question for tonight, but I think it's one that probably a lot of churches might benefit from knowing from you. And that basically is what do you recommend, or how would you go about maybe fixing a situation, maybe if someone does have that territorial spirit, either way, how would you address that? What would be your first thing that you would try to do to kind of fix that? Because that can happen, of course, anywhere.
Well, you know, there is something I think that is really prominent, and I always call it like the sound man spirit or the sound man syndrome. And you see it all over the place. Like it's this attitude of territorialism, of this like defensiveness, this sort of like, this is my sound booth. This is, you know, you don't touch. Those are my microphones. You know, you don't touch. And it's unfortunate because it's a lot of that, I think, is built off of insecurity ultimately. That's my experience, is that the guys that are most offensive, that are most territorial, are the ones that don't want you to get beyond their little wall that they've built up. Because if you see into that wall, if you see behind the curtain, you're going to realize that they don't really know as much as they're making themselves out to know. And they're going to become vulnerable. And that's the defense that they tend to put up. It's the people that really are confident in their abilities, that know, you know, have a bit of knowledge often, that are not afraid of that, because, you know, you got to be able to say sometimes you don't know the answer to things, you know. But it's the ones that, I think it's a lot of it's built off defensiveness. So, you know, how do you break that? Obviously, I think they're dealing with that personally in their life, but often, to me, one of the best ways to do that is to try to build that paradigm, or get into them the vision of the value of what their ministry is. Because you know what, when it comes down to it, we're not often setting up our sound people for success. You know, we expect so much of them. We expect them to be able to perform, but we had never trained them. You know, you might have taken bass lessons for 15 years, you know, or piano lessons, and you studied for whatever in school, but your sound guy is just an electrician, you know, or he's just, you know what I mean? Yeah. So they never learned sound. They've just been doing it. Somebody asked them because they didn't have a sound person. So ultimately, you can't expect them to perform at a high level when you never set them up for success in the first place. So let's get these guys educated. Let's get these people learned. Let's teach them what the approach is. Let's instill in them the vision of the church, the vision of the music department, and let's communicate to them correctly, and let's break down those barriers by building trust. You know, that's what it is. The guy doesn't trust you.
That's very good. I love that, because I mean, you're exactly right. In many cases, they just say, "Hey, so and so, can you help run sound?" And they're just learning on the job, basically. That's very true. We have a question, Vito. Actually, a friend of you and I's, Aaron Curtis, is on tonight, and he had a question. I'm going to put him on with you, Vito, and let him ask. He has a very good question.
Hey, Vito, I just really appreciate your time tonight. It's an honor to speak with you tonight.
Hey, Aaron. How you doing?
Here's my question. What is your approach to going, or at least going about teaching new sound engineers in such a way that will make them fully proficient for an apostolic service?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, for me, I get the opportunity to go do these trainings for churches, but you know, one of the problems even with me coming for a weekend is that, you know, like try teaching somebody the piano in 2 days. You know, you can't do it. So it takes a lifetime of exposure and stuff. So what I try to instill in the weekend that I go out often to do training is I try to get these people thinking correctly. Try to get them to have the right paradigm, to understand like this ministry. You have to expose them so that the burden, you know, like Brother Sleva here at IBC always says, exposure breeds a burden. And I really think that's true for like young musicians, for singers. Like, you don't realize how bad you are unless you're exposed to people better than you, you know? And we see that at IBC a lot because, you know, musicians come in, they're the best in their church. They're on top of their world. They come to IBC and they're like amongst the worst, maybe. So it's like it's a reality check to people that there's always somebody better, you know. So I try to expose them in a way to realize like this ministry is something you can learn more about. So you have to somehow show them that there's more to it than what you're doing, and this is the road. I want to open this path for you to go down. But you're going to have to ultimately go down this path yourself. But if I could just show them, if I could just reveal to them that path, if I could just kind of expose them to see like, wow, this thing's bigger than I thought. There's a lot more to sound. Like people say that all the time to me, like, I didn't realize there was more to sound than what we did here, you know? Or like one time I was in a church and I was working on like tuning a sound system, and the pastor said, "You're going to tune these speakers?" I never heard of tuning speakers before. You know, he's thinking like it's a guitar or whatever. So like, you know, exposing them to these new concepts. So part of that I think comes through reading the right books, watching the right videos, talking to the right people, asking the right people the right questions. You know, in your case, I think, you know, Aaron, you already have a knowledge of, you know, you went to school for recording and stuff, and we, you know, so you have the ability to easily reach into their lives and get them going, you know, in that way. But I think where people miss it, you know, where people miss the mark a lot of times is they, and this is typical for where we are in society, is we're so stuck on the event and we lose the passion for the process, you know. We get stuck on like for example, here's an example of that. Like IBC does a live recording every year. Well, these musicians come through IBC and they get transformed through being a part of these recordings and stuff. But that one Friday night we do the recording is not what transformed these musicians' lives. It's the process of getting to that night. It's the weeks and months of preparation and late night practices and being in the trenches that really is what transforms your life. That one night is almost, it breezes through. You're on autopilot, you know. So you got to get them to fall in love with the process, you know. Trust the process, fall in love with the process, and that to me is what's gonna transform you, I think, you know. So,
Aaron, thank you so much, man, for joining in tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Thank you for doing this webinar. This is great.
Absolutely, thanks, Aaron. I'm going to put Sister Natasha Baldwin on. Sister Natasha, are you there? You can ask your question to Brother Vito.
I have a quick question. You spoke about literature that we can get to help our sound technicians in their training and things like that. What are some of the books that you suggest that we can possibly get?
I'm in my office now, so I have the books right here.
Which 50 books would you like to read?
Something to start us off with.
Yeah. Oh, it's not here. So there's I guess it's not right in front of me, the book. I must have it in a different room. But one of the books I use as a textbook here at IBC for the beginner sound class here, and the book is actually, it has a good amount of stuff. It's called the Ultimate Church Sound Operator's Handbook by Bill Gibson. Ultimate Church Sound Operator's Handbook by Bill Gibson. You can get it on Amazon or whatever. It's a pretty good, well-rounded like primer to church sound. I think we also have to understand this concept though too, or be aware of it, is there's sort of two worlds to sound. There's like the design world where like you're putting together sound systems, you're hooking things up and stuff. It's like very technical, involves a lot of math and physics and stuff, maybe. And then there's like the mixing world, like operating sound, like being behind the mixer, communicating to the team and stuff. And I find that part, that aspect, like the Sunday to Sunday or whatever, that's the hardest thing to teach people, because it's about musicality. You know, sometimes teaching somebody how to hear something is one of the most difficult things. I find teaching mixing is one of the most difficult things. And actually, nowadays, the world of sound has transformed because of this new technology called the digital mixer. And since the digital mixer was invented, we have a phenomenal tool called the Virtual Soundcheck that has really transformed what we can do. And it allows you to come on an off night. We did a video on it a while back for UPCI Music, so you could check that out. But it allows you to come on an off night. You know, you could bring in little Johnny on a Tuesday night and say mix Sunday service, and you could re-EQ things how you want, and you know, I want you to practice mixing that service. And so, sure, there's principles behind the EQing, there's principles behind blending, there's principles behind compression and stuff, and you can learn those principles. But ultimately, those tech principles are a means to operate musically. It's just like a keyboard player. Like, you got to learn chords, you got to learn the muscle memory for the chord shapes, you have to learn the coordination between your left and right hand, you have to get independence. So those are all technical aspects, like scales and stuff. But the best way you could say, like, the ultimate musician is one that knows how to operate beyond technicality, right? So like when we're operating as the best musician or singer, we can sing or play what we want at any time without having to focus so much, you know. It's the same thing with sound. Learn the technical stuff so you could operate in the musical world, so you can flow in worship. And that's why I say, like, that the maximum preparation allows for maximum flexibility. The more you have on the tech side, the more you can operate in the music side, which allows us to then flow in the worship side. You know, that's where we operate differently than any other part of music in the world. You know, God allows us to often operate even beyond 100% of our ability, which is really cool too, because we're the only people in the world, you could say, Holy Ghost filled people that can operate at 120% of our ability, because God fills the provision beyond where we can go. And we've all been in those situations where God takes us past where we can possibly go, and we look back and say, I don't even know how I did that. And somebody might come up to you afterwards, service, and say, hey, what were you doing there? I have no clue. Yeah, we'd have to go back and look at it. So yeah, that's a good book. Anyway, that's a good book. You know, there's so many resources on YouTube with sound now. It's insane. So there's tons of stuff. The thing is, what you got to really be careful with is the social media noise. So there's these Facebook groups now, like sound Facebook groups that exist, and there's a ton of like noise, and it's hard to sort out good advice from like noise. Let's put it that way. So be careful with those, I would say. You know, but YouTube is great. I learn a lot from YouTube all the time. So conferences.
Thank you, Sister Natasha. I hope that helped a little bit to get to know the book there. And then I also wanted to reiterate, Brother Vito, you said it a little bit, but I also wanted to reiterate to our members that you have several videos, you know, in their membership that they have access to every single month. And I honestly, I watch them. I'm learning stuff from you, things that I didn't know, because I like to learn about sound myself. So take advantage of that is what I'm saying to all of our members, man. Vito has great videos on there, and so go back and watch them. Make sure your sound men are watching them, and I think that'd be a great tool to give them, because you said something that I really don't think a lot of people think about. I think that we can give our sound operators a great gift, is even if we go to our pastors and say, you know what, can we raise some money and send our guy to such and such, you know, training? Can you imagine what that would do for them and how that would make them feel that their church would invest in them? That would be amazing.
Sure. That's
And
good.
I mean, I just think that's something that maybe gives someone an idea tonight to say, you know what, we send our music and our worship pastors to music conferences, but sometimes we don't do anything for our sound man. Let's send them to a sound conference just for them. That might be really cool to do. I just thought of that just tonight. So, Vito, I think there's probably plenty. You just went to one in Chicago, didn't you?
Yeah, that was the first in, last out. You know, I those are ways that help me recharge, you know, and refresh myself, because if, you know, as a teacher, you're constantly pouring out and investing in people. So when I go to those things, it's just like re-energizes me with stuff. So I thrive on some of that stuff, you know.
Awesome.
So, you know, we're only as good as you know, your worship team really is only as good as your sound person lets it, really. You're only going to sound as good as your sound person allows it, in a sense, or as much as their skill sort of brings it. So you're doing your whole team a favor when you try to train your sound guy, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what you've had to say tonight has been wonderful. I really appreciate the questions tonight. I know there's others that may not want to go on the webinar tonight, but we're going to have this archived on our website so people can go back and watch this. So if you're watching tonight and you want someone else to see this, we will have this archived on our Talk Music webinars at the top of upcimusic.com. So, Brother Vito, thank you so much, man. I always enjoy hearing you speak. It's your passion. You're so good at it, and your spirit is incredible. I love what you said about you've got to be filled with the Holy Ghost to be an apostolic sound man, because how are you going to flow in the Spirit without that, you know? And I love what you said about that. And don't bring outside, because they're not going to understand exactly how we flow in services. So that was another good point. But thank you tonight for being here. Any last thing you want to share before we end?
I think we're good. I mean, I feel like we've touched on it pretty good, you know. I hope that you guys can really implement some of the stuff, because so many churches I go to, there really is this gap, you know, and it's unfortunate. And so I would like to see that culture change. I'm a big proponent of doing away with that utility, the culture of like treating sound as a utility, and put it in its rightful place as a member of the worship team, and show people the value, you know. And I, you know, I can manipulate stuff. I can manipulate something in service for what I want if I'm not careful, you know. And that's what your sound people have to understand too, is that they can make it about themselves. You know, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. If I bump the bass drum up, you know, in the right moment, it's gonna it could be the wrong moment for it, you know, if that's not what's calling the Spirit. You know, people start moving.
I said this before we went on tonight, but basically we're on the same team. We want the same thing. You know, that's one thing you've got to really drive home in your team, between the music and the sound, is just making sure, hey, we want the same outcome here. All right, Brother Vito, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time.
Thanks again.
And everybody for being here tonight. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to next month. I love having different guests on every single month. It just gives us good insight, and we learn from each other. And so, Brother Vito, you helped us tonight. Thank you so much. And everyone, I hope you have a great night. We'll see you next month for our July Talk Music webinar. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
Take care.